Thank you so much for joining us again on another episode of the Adat Shalom podcast. I'm Daniel, and today we're going to be discussing the war in Israel, issues with Hamas and Hezbollah, and also how the war is being framed on social media and in the world abroad. And with me is Adam Kedosh, my good friend. Adam was born in Israel, he served in the IDF, and he has a unique and in-depth perspective on all these issues. So I'm very thankful that he was able to come on and hang out with us, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. So without further ado, Adam, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And as you said, I was born in Israel a long, long time ago. And I served in the IDF. And we left Israel in 2017. So I can bring a perspective both as a soldier that served and fought, and as a father for two kids that were supposed to be in the army in Israel right now, fighting in Gaza to protect their families. So, as a family, most of our life uh, was in Israel. We lived in Beersheba.
Hmm.
Now, I will try to communicate my experience as a father and as a soldier, and try and connect some of the dots as best as my understanding and knowledge regarding the war. October 7 was a surprise, and we all wish that it didn't happen. Maybe a certain group of people would not wish that, and they were actually planning, preparing, and manipulating a lot of other spaces and functions to make this happen. The military achievement that Hamas achieved was not a small one. They were able to detect a lack of security forces, where basically Gaza and Israel weren't engaged in a military action up to October 7. But they were able to detect that the security numbers of soldiers that are supposed to keep their posts and supposed to keep the border secured was different. Something changed. We do know that they planned and prepared for a long time, and we are now aware of a very highly sophisticated and able organization, because they were able to deceive Israel, that believed that they are really going towards a peaceful, I would say a peaceful intention, a peaceful future. A few days before October 7, there was a consent. There was a joint decision to allow more Gaza people, to go into Israel to work, to find jobs. Israel pays well, okay, meaning that you would get an Israeli salary or compensation for your work. And I believe that Gaza has a different market and a different salary and a different minimum wage. So that was something that Israel saw as a necessary aspect to maintain a peaceful relationship with Gaza, and was aware or believed or acted in a manner that suggested that sporadic attacks like missiles, and we had all kinds of special balloons that flew over the border and burned fields were only sporadic. Nobody really comprehended, or I would say wanted to believe that October 7 is an actual possibility, not because we thought that the fence will stop somebody. I encountered the fence that is supposed to let the IDF know that somebody is crossing the border. I met that fence back in 95 when I was a soldier. The fence didn't change that much. The whole purpose was to let the IDF soldiers know that somebody is crossing over. And it is a very legitimate, I would say, practice that you don't cross over anywhere between countries. You have specific places that you cross over. Maybe up here in the north where it's Canada and it's wild terrain, there is no border, but I know that we are in Texas, and Texas is a borderline with Mexico.
Right. Yeah.
And you can cross over, but in specific places. So, and you can cross over and find employment or find other things that you are looking for if you go through the regular channels. And this is exactly what we had between Israel and Gaza. I can go even further back and say that when I was a kid, and I'm looking at 12 years old, 13 years old, my father was doing business on a daily basis with his partners in Gaza. And back then there was a different interaction. There was a peaceful interaction. People wanted to live and keep on going with the daily business. Things have changed. Somewhere in the 90s, there was a new way of conducting terror, which was suicide bombers. As a teenager, one of the incidents that affected me is a bombing that took place in a discotheque, in a place where my friends, we were at high school, we would go on a Friday evening to dance, to have a good time. And somebody went inside and just blew himself and killed, I think, 20, maybe 15 young kids, high school kids. Another event that was, as as you say, almost relevant, I was almost involved, is a bus that blew. A bus that I would take every week from my house to a place I would box. I had a boxing gym. So that was the routing, the route I did with the bus. It's only a matter of a day or two, but that bus also exploded. I was very influenced by that, and I decided to join the army and become a combat warrior. I actually I let go of an option to become a pilot, and I joined a very unique operating unit that eventually operated both in Gaza and in Lebanon. Going back to the 90s, we were looking at different organizations that IDF dealt with. Hamas wasn't in play, and back then Israel was actually engaging in Lebanon, holding some kind of a strip, a security strip, where it conducted security activities. Moving forward to October 7, we can see that it's a different game. an operation in a scale like the one that we saw on October 7 that was kept fairly secret. And if not secret enough, I would say the intent or the actual deployment weren't clear. So there was a level of craftsmanship, counterintelligence, I would say, thinking and planning, which Israel didn't encounter. Several mechanisms in Israel intelligence assessment didn't perform correctly. We know that the preparation timeline was done on several occasions, because we know that people that worked for almost a decade in settlements that were attacked reported to the Hamas military branch or to those individuals that planned and commanded this raid, where family names, house numbers, streets, if the family had a dog or did not have a dog, everything appeared in, I would say, intelligence reports that Hamas was creating. So the attack would be so precise that attackers would have an address, would have a door, would know exactly where are they going into. That level of preparation and craftsman was not seen before. Looking at a military agenda, one has to wonder, what was the objectives? We know that there were roughly 1,000 really trained, you would say, special units, Nukba, from the Hamas. And there were more people that joined this raid. We know from terrorists that were interrogated that some got specific orders and some got different orders. We know that some were ordered to ravage and rape and to do horrific things, and some were ordered to take hostages. The aftermath will show that there was no military agenda. There was no attempt to win over the IDF or to conquer Israel or to conquer back or to take lands. So one has to wonder, what was the agenda? I would say that there was a very deep thinking about starting a war, making Israel realizing that it has no other option than to go into Gaza and to take down the infrastructure, the 300 kilometers of tunnels that were dug under Gaza, that served the Hamas to move around fairly easily, undetected. Now, I believe that Hamas didn't invent the idea. I believe that United States, a long time ago, or not that long, in Vietnam, had the same situations with a guerrilla force that dug tunnels. I believe that was even a common practice in Second World War. You can actually see that in Netflix. and it makes a lot of sense when you are not looking to occupy a land. The Hamas was looking to provoke Israel to go into Gaza. That would be my understanding. That would be my aftermath thinking. This level of sophistication and coordination is not a small militant group deciding to rush over the fence and to kill 10, 20 Israeli citizens. This was a really high performing action that had a specific agenda. That agenda was to make Israel understand that the current situation and the threats that were built upon a physical infrastructure as the tunnels cannot cannot be or cannot be not handled. Israel needs to handle those tunnels because rockets, Israel somehow figured that one out with the Iron Dome. Okay, small scale attacks are handled by the security forces from the IDF. But building up armory, building up infrastructure, having computers, having the option to conceal your actions is possible only because of the tunnels. So the main objective for a military force like Israeli IDF that needs to protect its citizens is to handle the major threat or the major infrastructure that allows that threat to flourish, which is the tunnels. That made Israel go into Gaza with a land or a ground campaign, mobilizing hundreds of thousands of soldiers. And unfortunately, going into war. When going into war, you need to have military decision taken, military strategic assessment and decision that you need to take. You need to do your best not to have collateral damage. But in the case of Gaza, that was a decision of either not taking care of the tunnels, not re-engaging Hamas, waiting for a next October 7, or executing a right for self-defense. From past military activities that IDF has done, you can realize that everything is done in a manner where people who are not engaged in direct fighting have the opportunity to move, have the opportunity and know what is going to happen. The question if you should take down a building who has missiles being shot from it, yes or no, even though it's a hospital or maybe even a school, is not a question of moral, it's a question of military. And Israel didn't have any option then to do what was necessary to protect Israeli citizens and to take care of the real problem, which is Hamas' abilities to affect the military situation. I think, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, to go back to something that you mentioned earlier, and we actually talked about this off camera. What was the ultimate result of Hamas's work? Did they accomplish what they set out to do, and the effect that had in terms of the global perspective on Israel? If you could just talk about that.
Yes, I believe that the masterminds, not even the foot soldiers, not the actual people that raided Israel, are very much aware about how things or how content or how information is moving nowadays. Nowadays, a content produced on a phone in one country can immediately affect a person looking at his phone in another country.
Right.
So we can move content from China to India almost in the same time.
Right.
I believe that there was, I would say, a very serious thinking about what would happen. How would Israel react? There were only two options. One would be not to go into a military campaign, and the other one was to go into a military campaign, which eventually brought us to where we are right now.
Right.
I believe that people on Hamas leadership and some of their sponsors are highly intelligent and wanted to have a worldwide opinion and a worldwide accessibility to what we are now experiencing in Gaza. I think that this would be one of the main reasons to operate in the way that they did operate. Raiding civilians, raiding old people, raiding women and children, and kidnapping people without achieving any military agenda. They could have tried to sabotage maybe Air Force aircrafts, or maybe take down heavy machinery like tanks or artillery, but they didn't. The main focus was civilian people, women, children, to create as much carnage as possible, to force Israel into a reaction that will bring finality to the situation. Israel will not stop until a long-term, not solution, but a long-term effect on Hamas abilities will be produced. If all of this have happened, and in 3 years Hamas will have the same abilities that he had on October 7, something in Israel strategic planning is wrong. And I don't believe it will happen. Israel is now taking down the one real weapon that Hamas is using, which are the tunnels. The tunnels harbor weapons. The tunnels concealed intentions. The tunnels harbor communication channels. Everything can be conducted while above the tunnels you have a day-to-day regular life. Schools, hospitals, banks, people are living their life. But in that underground city, you have a militant group of people that are preparing to kill other people. So Israel will not stop unless we will have a situation where the hostages will be released. And Israel will probably have to release some terrorists that were taken captive along several years. But for Israel to stop without achieving a military objective of injuring the abilities of the Hamas would be a great mistake, which I don't believe Israel will do.
Okay.
I do believe that Hamas was not Hamas as an organization, but some of the, I would say, leaders or masterminds were looking for a long campaign, a campaign where we would encounter and see exactly what we are seeing right now in terms of what will you do with the population in Gaza? How would that affect them?
Right.
Go ahead.
The feeling and the sort of the attitude of people on the ground. I was in Israel 3 months before the conflict started. It was part of my global practicum for my school. We had to go abroad and serve in a community outside the U.S., and we had the opportunity to go to Israel, and we were all over the country. We went and visited the Golan Heights. We were in Galilee. We were in Nazareth. We were in the Old City, Jerusalem. And the perspective, excuse me, as somebody outside of having lived in Israel, just walking around in the city, engaging with people, talking, was that there was tension, understandably, but it wasn't, there was no feeling or no reason to think that this was going to happen, that there was going to suddenly be this explosion of violence and all this. You talked about earlier that it was a surprise. Were there any indications on the ground in terms of people engaging with each other that something was coming, that there was something in the works that people needed to be concerned about or afraid about?
I believe that being a citizen in Israel is being able to accept the fact that you are looking for a peaceful future. Going about your daily activities, knowing that there is going to be a war, there is going to be an attempt to kill civilian people. There is always an agenda to kill more Israeli citizens, is a very problematic way of conducting your life. Some would say even naive in nature. But we have been doing that. I think that it's hard to think of having a family in a country where war is the only future you have. So Israeli citizens were always reaching out to have a peaceful interaction with their neighbors.
Right.
Anything that will accommodate that. The last 3 decades have produced an interaction where if Israel would not defend itself, the other side will not stop.
Right.
So Israel will always have to defend itself as long as the other side keeps on attacking Israel.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need to do some kind of a preventive action, knowing that a certain individual or a certain group or a certain house, place, location present an actual threat. Missiles can be harbored over there. An individual who is going to have an intent to run over Israeli people. Simple as that. In the last 3 years, I think this has made the headlines. Just take your car and run over some people. Stab a person or two. That will definitely make Israel take some preventive actions. Looking into a military organization like Hamas, Israel will never attack for trying to achieve a military agenda, because IDF was not designed to combat Hamas. IDF was not designed to combat Hezbollah. IDF was formed along many years when Israel confronted nations, when Israel had wars with armies, with tanks, with air force, with navy. And the IDF was built for that. The IDF has the capability of handling any threat coming from Hezbollah by utilizing several smart bombs and planes that will go over that specific area. Israel Army, the IDF has more capabilities that can handle nations and large-scale armies. But Israel has no agenda of a military attack just for the sake of a military attack. Israel IDF was always there to protect Israel.
Right.
The interaction along many years was never smooth. Taking 18-year-old kids and instead of letting them go to college, become lawyers, become doctors, teachers, having them learn music and art, you take them and you make them responsible to keep their parents, their young siblings, their grandfathers safe. You put them at the borders so they may keep their family safe. And they live in a reality where they know that if they will not do it and their friends will not do it, the other side will not stop.
Right.
October 7 happened because Israel thought it could never happen. Israel thought that we are going to a peaceful future, putting aside those sporadic attacks. But Israel never imagined, and you can see that in some of the articles and content that tries to shed some light about the processes that were taken in the 24, even 48 hours previous to October 7. Information moving from ground level up and down was assessed not as a real threat, but more of an exercise, more of something which is not a real threat. That was because those assessments were sitting under the belief and the wishful thinking of peace in mind. And now I believe there was an awakening. And now I believe the future will be a bit different from Israel point of view.
Right.
Understanding that this is a fact, that 3,000 raiders pillaged, raped, burned people alive. And this is something that we cannot really magically, wishfully make go away or disappear. We have
Right.
different influences. We have money involved. We have ideology. We have hardship. We have in Gaza all the elements that will produce a new Hamas or a new group of radicals that will be funded, that will have the abilities to produce threats against Israel. Take in mind that Israel will hopefully not be naive like it was, at least not for a few decades moving forward.
Well, Adam, I've really appreciated having you on, and everything that you've shared has been just so beneficial, so helpful for my perspective, for those who are watching. how can we be involved in supporting Israel in a way that actually helps?
I think that a critical thinking needs to be done, looking at agendas. Israel has nothing to gain
Mm.
from a military action.
Mm.
Israel doesn't need more land.
Right.
Israel will not achieve natural resources. The only agenda of Israel is to keep on going forward, keeping everything normal, going to job, going to work, going to school. There is no agenda of keeping a military operation which costs a lot of money.
Mm.
The burden in taxes is something that an Israeli has to accept as a part of reality. He is paying for security.
Mm.
He's paying for the best technology.
Mm-hmm.
He's paying salaries. 300,000 people left their jobs for almost 3 months. Somebody needs to pay them so they may feed their families. That burden will translate into more taxes in the next 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 years. So people need to have critical thinking,
Mm.
ask themselves, what is the agenda?
Right.
What will Israel achieve? What will Hamas achieve? Well, Gaza needs to be rehabilitated, definitely. That money cannot come from Hamas. That money will probably come from other countries, from worldwide contributions, from worldwide organizations. Now, that has been going on for 20 years. International money was funneled into Gaza to help build hospitals, schools, to give food to people that needed food. But somehow, Hamas management became billionaires.
Mm.
Somehow they had enough money to build a city underground, to pay workers to dig tunnels, to bring cement, to bring concrete, to make sure nothing will cave in, to bring air condition, plumbing, electricity, hundreds of miles. So what's important is critical thinking. And the critical thinking should lead us to how can we move forward into a future. What are we looking to achieve? What is the agenda?
Mm.
What will happen if Hamas or the next organization or population in general will not attack Israel?
Mm.
And what will happen if Israel will not defend itself?
Mm.
Is October 7 occurrence can be repeated? What will make the situation a situation where there won't be a spiritual motivation to attack Israel again and to trigger a full-scale war? I would say that public and international opinion,
Mm.
realizing that Israel has no other option except defending itself,
Right.
is very important. If Israel could magically disappear all those threats, she would probably do that. But we don't live in a Harry Potter book. We live in real life, and real people were injured and dead and real military actions had to be taken.
Right.
But you always need to remember the agenda. And you always need to remember maybe what would have happened if not. What would have happened if October 7 didn't occur?
Right.
Would Israel go ahead and invade Gaza? Would Israel have anything to achieve? No. Israel actually gave land, wanted to make peace, were willing to combat internally, taking people's land. Okay, just imagine federal government deciding that he wants to give back or wants to give away parts to Canada. Okay, so people will be basically through a government ordinance, federal ordinance, will be evicted from their houses. Okay, people were basically evicted by force. Israeli citizens were evicted by force from their houses by the Israeli military. People were evicted, were pulled. Okay,
Right.
So those houses, those factories, those greenhouses, those amazing productive places would be given as a part of a way to solidify peace. But the only thing that they did is they gave the Hamas an easier job to do, because now it was closer to dig. They didn't take the greenhouses, they didn't use all the plants that were left over there to manufacture and build a great life for their population and citizens. They didn't. They used those fields that were given to them in a strategically way, where they were closer to kibbutzim in Israel, and eventually brought October 7 and everything we are seeing right now. This kind of critical thinking is very important. This kind of critical thinking should be discussed and should be observed in a way that can promise peace and not violence. Violence will only lead violence. Any kind of a military action will not liberate nobody, will not level the playing field. Any violent will be met with a self-defense action and will lead to more violent. As I said, critical thinking needs to lead people to understand that the IDF was not designed as a local police officer force. It's an army designed to protect Israel citizens from countries.
Right.
So, taking that in mind and looking at a peace that we have with countries like Egypt, like Jordan, this is the one thing we need to think about. This is the one thing we should pray about. This is something that we need to communicate globally, that any future that will have peace in it cannot have one side declaring war on the other side. Any peace, any future with peace in it cannot have bodies, groups of people holding a manifest, holding an ideology, a mindset where another group of people should be exterminated. And this is a part of a critical thinking that needs to be done. you need to look at those people who are holding the, how do you call it? In the car.
Driving.
Yeah,
the,
the drivers,
the drivers.
not those who are sitting beside them.
Right.
And if the one who is holding the driver is full of hate and malintent,
Right.
okay,
The one behind the wheel.
the
Yeah.
one behind the wheel, if this organization has a certain agenda and a certain manifest, okay, which clearly state where is he taking the car to, all of those who are sitting behind him and a part of that car
Right.
will eventually be a part of the consequences
Sure.
in that future. So what can we do? We can employ and deploy critical thinking, looking at agenda, looking at what will happen if Hamas didn't attack. Okay, looking at what would have happened if Israel wouldn't attack. Would Hamas stop? Or would he feel that he had achieved something and will try and do it again? I believe that content running around in social media should be addressed in a very responsible manner. Nobody's saying that people are not getting hurt. This is a war situation.
Right.
No one is saying that we are not heartbroken.
Right.
And we wish that things were different. If I were in Israel, 3 of my family members, my close family members, would have been engaged in a war situation. Me and my 2 boys.
Yeah.
So that means that either one of us could find himself getting killed. And nobody wants that. Nobody, no Israeli citizen is looking for a life where dying is better than living. And for that, Israel will have concessions. And for that, Israel did concessions. And for that, Israel made herself vulnerable in her mindset and in her assessment of the real intentions behind organizations that were allegedly partners, allegedly wanting peace, but eventually triggering war. So that should be the critical thinking, that should be the mindset. What is the agenda? What was the agenda?
Right.
What is the declared agenda of this person or group of people, and what is this agenda? Israel agenda is formulated in declaration manifest. And I think you can see it right now. In Israel, we have many nations. We have people who were born outside of Israel and now are living inside of Israel. We have Arabs, we have Muslims, Christians, Jews. We have full freedom to practice whatever you like and do whatever you like. And that was the main goal, that was the purpose, and still is. IDF protects everybody. There is no difference. And that is the agenda. The agenda of Israel is to have a peaceful future, is to go through, and Israel has proven that, go through concessions, to bury the grief, to hope for a better future for our kids. This is something that Israel always done as a nation, as a group of people, but unfortunately never found the right partner to present a real peace when we are addressing Gaza. I'm not sure how to address them, but back then, before they became October 7 perpetrators, they were leadership. politicians coming in a cloak of peaceful leaders that are looking to advance the relationship. I believe that the next 10 years will give us an insight into the real agenda of Israel, which was also and always will be peace. And we can only pray that Gaza will find the right leaders that will advance a peaceful future and not trigger more violent, trying even to stir things with West Bank and try and maybe open something for Hezbollah. Basically, hopefully, we pray that a peaceful future will come to that region. Caring, mindful leaders in Gaza and West Bank will appear and present themselves and will promote peaceful times.
Absolutely. Yeah. Adam, thank you again so much for being here. It's been a pleasure listening and talking and just getting so much wonderful information that is necessary for people to understand what's really taking place and what's going on in Israel. So thank you so much for being here, and look forward to hopefully seeing you again on the show.
Definitely. Thank you very much.
You got it.